This is Jada Williams. At just 8 years old, she had carried more burdens than most grown hearts could bear. Born to a drug-addicted mother on the unforgiving streets of Atlanta, Jada had no father, no roof over her head, and no promise of a next meal. Yet, in her small hands, she held something extraordinary, a mind that refused to break. But one day, everything changed. She met Alma Marshall, the lonely daughter of one of Georgia's richest men, struggling spun, a billionaire who owned half the city's skyline. And it was Jada, the girl from the shadows, who became Alma's secret teacher under a maple tree. When Alma's powerful father caught them together, what he did next turned an entire city silent with awe. So settle in, hold tight, and prepare for a story that's not just about wealth and want. It's about a child's courage rewriting fate. If you're new here, follow along and share this tale to spread its light. My beautiful family, let's start with a blessing. Dear Lord, I ask you to surround every person watching with peace, healing, and endless love. Amen. You are not just an audience. You are my family, the reason I push through on the hardest days. For those who are new here, welcome to the family. Please subscribe, say hello in the comments, and let's grow closer together. Each story I bring is my sacrifice and devotion. When you walk away early, it feels like my heart is left unheard. Please, stay with me through the journey until the very end. I love you always. Now, let us begin. The corner of Pine and Glen Street hummed with chaos. Car horns blared, broken bottles crunched underfoot, and the cold Atlanta air stung Jada's bare arms. Her mother, Ida, slumped against a flickering streetlight, muttering to ghosts only she could see, her trembling hands clutching a paper cup. "Get your crackhead self off my block," a shopkeeper spat, his voice sharp as the glass on the pavement. Passers-by glanced over, some with pity, most with scorn, but none stopped to help. Jada, small and watchful, stayed close, wiping her mother's face with a stolen diner napkin. She'd learned to survive, snatching torn magazines from bus stops to teach herself to read, scratching math problems in the dirt by gas station light. At night, when the city grew quiet, Jada would whisper, "Mom, one day I'll buy you a house. No more bridges." Her young voice held a stubborn hope, a spark no street could snuff out. But the streets of Atlanta never promised safety. One rainy morning, as dawn bled gray through the clouds, red and blue lights pulsed against the wet concrete of the Pine Street overpass. Jada stirred, her small body curled beside Ida on a damp cardboard sheet. The air smelled of rain and exhaust. A low rumble of voices grew louder, boots crunching, radios crackling. Jada's eyes snapped open. "Ma'am, we've had reports of a child living out here," a police officer said, his flashlight cutting through the drizzle. Ida jolted upright, her eyes wild, clutching Jada's arm so tight it hurt. "No, you can't take her," she screamed, her voice raw, like a wounded animal's. Jada froze, heart pounding, as two women in stiff jackets stepped forward. Child Protective Services, their badges glinting like cold steel. "She's mine. My baby." Ida lunged, clawing at the air, but an officer held her back. Jada clung to her mother's ragged sweater, her small fingers digging into the worn fabric. "Mom, don't let them," she cried, her voice drowned by Aida's wails. The women moved fast, one gripping Jada's shoulders, pulling her away. Ida fought like a lioness, kicking, sobbing, her hands reaching through the rain. "Jada, my little genius," she screamed, her voice cracking as she fell to her knees. The car door slammed. Jada pressed her face to the window, her breath fogging the glass, watching her mother collapse under the overpass. Aida's screams chased her down the street long after the car turned the corner, the sound carving a wound in Jada's chest that no time could heal. She clutched a tattered book of fairy tales, its pages soft from rain, and whispered, "I'll come back, Mom. I promise." The foster home was a grey building that smelled of bleach and regret. Jada stayed quiet, her dark eyes scanning everything. Other kids shouting, social workers scribbling notes. She was different, they said. Polite. Too smart for an 8-year-old from the streets. While others played, Jada read scraps of newspapers or library books she'd sneak from the common room, piecing together words like puzzles. She traced equations in the margins, her mind a refuge from the ache of missing her mother. At night, she'd lie awake, replaying Aida's screams, wondering if her mother still remembered her name. Weeks later, the social worker called her in. "Jada, you're getting a new start," she said, her smile too bright. Ethan and Melissa Crawford stood in the office, a white couple from suburban Atlanta, their clothes crisp and their smiles polished. Ethan's handshake was firm, Melissa's hug too tight, like she was posing for a picture. "We've always wanted a little girl," Melissa said, her voice syrupy, a camera flashing as they signed the papers. Jada clutched her book, her small frame swallowed by a too-big coat they'd brought. The social worker beamed. "This is your new life, Jada." In the car, Melissa chatted about their big house, their garden, their rules. Ethan glanced at Jada in the rearview mirror, his eyes unreadable. Jada nodded, her throat tight. Maybe this was the house she'd promised her mother. Maybe this was where the bridges ended. She looked out the window, Atlanta's skyline fading behind her, and let herself hope, just a little, that the Crawfords' smiles meant safety. But hope, like the streets, could lie. The Crawfords' home loomed large, its white columns gleaming under the Georgia sun. Inside, the air was cold, the floors too clean. Jada's room was a guest bed with stiff sheets, a far cry from the cardboard she knew. That night, as she lay under a ceiling that felt too high, she heard the click of a lock on the kitchen door. Melissa's voice drifted through the wall, sharp and low. She'd better behave. Jada hugged her book tighter, her mother's screams echoing in her mind. She didn't know what lay ahead, but she knew one thing: she'd survive. She always did. The Crawfords' home was a world apart from the streets. The first night, Jada sank into a clean bed, the sheets crisp and smelling of lavender. Melissa handed her a new dress, blue, with a bow that felt foreign against her skin. At dinner, a plate of steaming chicken and rice waited, more food than Jada had seen in weeks. Ethan smiled across the table, his teeth too white. "You're part of the family now," he said. Jada nodded, her stomach full but her chest hollow. She wanted to believe this was the house she'd promised her mother. But the shine faded fast. By the third day, the fridge was locked, a shiny padlock glinting under the kitchen light. "Food's for good girls," Melissa said, her voice sharp as she handed Jada a mop. The chores came endless, scrubbing floors, washing dishes, dusting shelves until her small hands blistered. When Jada misspoke, calling Melissa ma'am instead of mom, Ethan's eyes darkened. "Ungrateful," he muttered, his voice low, like a storm brewing. Melissa's critiques were sharper, her words slicing. "You're lucky we took you in, street rat." Jada stayed quiet, her mind racing, memorizing their patterns like she once memorized magazine words. Then she saw the first red light. It blinked in the corner of her bedroom, a tiny camera nestled behind a lamp. Another in the hallway, another in the living room, hidden in a picture frame. At night, lying still, Jada felt their gaze, like invisible hands watching her breathe. She stopped sleeping, her fairy tale book her only anchor. One night, whispers drifted through the walls, Ethan's voice, low and angry. "We can't mess up like with the last foster kid." Melissa hissed back, "She won't find out." None of them ever do. Jada's heart thudded, her small body curling tighter under the blanket. She had to know. One evening, while Melissa was at a book club and Ethan was in the garage, Jada slipped into the study. The room smelled of leather and polish, too perfect, like a stage. Her bare feet padded silently across the floor. Behind a bookshelf, she found it, a small camera, its lens glinting like an eye. Her fingers trembled as she traced the wires to a locked drawer. Using a paperclip from Ethan's desk, she picked the lock, her street-learned skills steadying her hands. Inside was a stack of memory cards, labeled with dates and initials she didn't recognize. She plugged one into Ethan's computer. The screen flickered, and Jada's breath caught. Footage played, grainy, but clear enough. A boy, younger than her, cowering as Ethan's hand swung down. A girl, tears streaming, pleading as Melissa's voice mocked her off-screen. Dozens of clips, each one worse, each child bruised and broken, filmed like trophies. Jada's stomach churned, her innocence cracking against the weight of what she'd seen. She wasn't just a servant here, she was prey. Her mind, sharp as ever, made the choice. She grabbed a memory card, slipped it into her shoe, and moved like a shadow. The house was quiet, the cameras blind to her now. She crept past the locked fridge, past the gleaming columns, and out the front door. The night air hit her like a slap, cold and sharp. She ran, barefoot, the pavement slicing her soles, blood trailing behind her. Atlanta's skyline loomed as she pushed forward, her lungs burning, her mother's name a prayer on her lips. By dawn, she reached Pine and Glen Street. Exhausted, she collapsed beside a dumpster, the familiar stench of garbage wrapping around her like an old blanket. The memory card pressed against her foot, a secret heavier than hunger. "Mom," she whispered, her voice raw, her eyes scanning the empty corner where Ida once sat. Jada was alone again, but she wasn't broken. She'd uncovered their truth, and that made her something new. Not just a survivor, but a fighter. The morning sun barely pierced the smog over Pine and Glen Street. Jada huddled by the dumpster, her bare feet crusted with blood, the memory card a sharp edge against her soul. Her stomach growled, but her eyes stayed fixed on the corner where her mother used to sit. A street vendor, an old man with a cart of bruised fruit, spotted her. "Hey, kid, you okay?" His voice was gruff but kind. Jada didn't answer, just clutched her tattered book. He hesitated, then pulled out a phone. "I'm calling someone to help." Police lights flashed again by noon, but this time Jada didn't run. She handed over the memory card, her small hands steady, her voice quiet but clear. "They hurt kids," she said. The officer's face tightened as he took it. Hours later, the news broke like a storm. Channel 5's headlines screamed across Atlanta. Prominent couple arrested for child exploitation. 8-year-old girl exposes secret. The memory card held horrors. Clips of terrified foster children, beaten and filmed by Ethan and Melissa Crawford. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashing outside the Crawfords' pristine home, now taped off like a crime scene. Social media buzzed, calling Jada the brave girl who saved others. Strangers shared her story, their posts glowing with praise. A child hero. She stopped monsters. But Jada didn't feel like a hero. She sat on a cracked sidewalk near Pine and Glen, feeding her mother, Ida, crumbs of bread she'd scavenged from a diner's trash. Aida's eyes were clouded, her hands trembling as she took the bread. You came back from the angels?" she murmured, her voice a fragile thread. Jada's throat tightened. She wiped her mother's face with a napkin, the same way she always had. "It's me, Mom. Just me." Aida's gaze drifted to the sky, chasing ghosts again. Jada's chest ached, not from hunger, but from the weight of being seen by the world, yet unseen by the one person she needed most. The city roared around her. News vans parked nearby, reporters shouting questions she didn't answer. A woman with a microphone called her inspiring. But Jada just wanted her mother to remember her name. She'd exposed the Crawfords, saved kids she'd never meet. But the victory felt hollow. The streets were still cold. Her mother was still sick. And Jada was still 8, carrying a heart too big for her small frame. That night, under a flickering streetlight, Jada sat cross-legged, her book open to a worn page about a girl who built a castle from nothing. The city lights glittered in the distance, their glow both beautiful and cruel. She traced the alphabet in the dirt, her fingers steady despite the chaos. "If I can save other kids," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of traffic, "maybe I can save us too." The words were a spark, small but fierce, lighting a path she couldn't yet see. Across the street, Marshall Elementary's gates gleamed, the private school's playground silent under the moon. Tomorrow, a girl named Olma would sit by that curb, crying over a worksheet. Tomorrow, Jada would take a step toward her. But tonight, she was just a child, holding on to hope as tightly as she held her mother's hand. By morning, Jada was back at Pine and Glen, her small frame weaving through the bustle of Atlanta's streets. She'd found a hustle, selling bottled water to drivers at the traffic light, her voice sharp and clear. Cold water, $1. The coins she earned bought bread for Ida, who sat muttering under a tattered blanket. Jada's eyes, though, kept drifting across the street to Marshall Elementary. The private school was a world of wonders. Kids in crisp uniforms laughed behind iron gates, their shiny shoes clicking like music. Yellow buses lined up like bars of gold, ferrying them to lives Jada could only imagine. She watched, fascinated, her tattered book tucked under her arm, her bare feet dusted with street grime. One humid afternoon, as the school bell rang and children spilled out, Jada noticed a girl lingering alone by the curb. She was 7, maybe, with pink sneakers and curls tied in ribbons, but her face was crumpled, tears streaking her cheeks. A crumpled worksheet lay in her lap. Jada hesitated, glancing at her water bottles, then back at the girl. Something in those tears felt familiar, lonely, like her own heart. She crossed the street, her steps slow, and crouched a safe distance away. "You okay?" she asked softly. The girl sniffed, wiping her eyes. "My driver's late, and I can't read this stupid homework. Everyone says I'm dumb." Her voice trembled, small and ashamed. Jada glanced at the worksheet. Simple addition. Numbers she'd taught herself under gas station lights. She picked up a stick, scratching a problem on the cracked sidewalk. "Look here," she said, her voice steady. "You add this, carry the one like this." Her stick moved like a teacher's chalk, clear and patient. The girl's eyes widened, following along. In minutes, she was nodding, a shy smile breaking through. I get it, she said. You're smarter than my teachers. Jada laughed, a soft sound that felt new in her throat. I'm just Jada. The girl stuck out her hand. I'm Alma Marshall. They sat there, one in rags, one in ribbons, the sidewalk their classroom. Each afternoon after that, Alma waited by the fence, her worksheet ready. Jada would slip across the street, leaving her water bottles by a lamppost. They'd sit, Alma inside the gate, Jada outside, under a sprawling maple tree. Jada drew math in the dirt, spelled words with pebbles, told stories from her book. Alma listened, her eyes bright, her laughter like a song Jada hadn't heard in years. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Alma clutched her worksheet, her face glowing. You make me feel smart, she said, her voice small but sure. Jada paused, her stick hovering over the dirt. She looked at Alma, at the hope in her eyes, and saw a mirror of her own stubborn spark. That's because you are, Jada replied, her words warm, like a promise. For the first time in months, Jada felt something lighter than survival. A connection, fragile but real, bridging the iron fence between their worlds. The maple tree became their haven. Each day, they shared more. Alma's fears of failing, Jada's dreams of a house for her mother. The fence didn't matter, their laughter did. Jada didn't know a man watched from a distance, his silver hair catching the light, his shadow long across the playground. She didn't know that tomorrow, everything would change again. Under the sprawling maple tree, Jada and Alma built a world of their own. Each afternoon, as the school bell echoed across Marshall Elementary, Jada left her water bottles by the lamppost and slipped across the street. Alma waited inside the iron fence, her pink sneakers scuffing the grass, a worksheet or book in hand. The air smelled of dry leaves and promise. They'd sit, Jada on the cracked sidewalk, Alma just beyond the bars, laughing over math problems scratched in the dirt or stories Jada wove from her tattered fairy tale book. Alma shared snacks from her lunchbox. Half a sandwich, a shiny apple, even a chocolate bar once, its wrapper crinkling like a secret. Jada savored each bite, her hunger softening under Alma's shy smile. At school, Alma began to shine. Teachers raised eyebrows as she answered questions in class, her voice steady where it once trembled. Well done, Alma, they'd say, pinning gold stars on her worksheets. Classmates noticed too, inviting her to games she'd once watched from the sidelines. It's because of you, Alma whispered one day, her curls bouncing as she leaned toward the fence. You make numbers make sense. Jada grinned, tracing a multiplication table with a stick. You just needed someone to believe in you, she said, her voice warm, like the sun filtering through the maple's leaves. One golden afternoon, as they sat sharing a bag of pretzels, Alma's eyes grew soft. My dad's never home, she said, her fingers twisting a blade of grass. He's Henry Marshall, builds big buildings, but I don't think he knows me. Not really. Her voice was small, like she was confessing a sin. Jada nodded, her own heart heavy. She told Alma about her mother, Ida, how she'd sing on rare clear days, her voice like a lullaby. I'm gonna get her a house one day, Jada said, her eyes fixed on the dirt where she'd drawn a lopsided home. No more streets. Alma's hand reached through the fence, brushing Jada's. You will. I know you will. The moment hung between them, fragile and true. Alma's voice dropped to a whisper. You're my best friend, Jada. Jada looked up, her throat tight. The world had taken so much, her mother's clarity, her safety, her childhood, but here was Alma, her smile brighter than Atlanta's skyline. "You're my only friend," Jada replied, her voice cracking with a joy she hadn't known she could feel. They locked pinkies through the fence, giggling. "This is our secret," Alma said, her eyes sparkling. "No one can know about our tree." Jada nodded, solemn as a vow. "No one." Their laughter carried on the breeze, blending with the rustle of leaves. They didn't see the teacher, Miss Carter, pause near the playground's edge, her clipboard forgotten in her hand. Her eyes narrowed, catching a flicker of movement beyond the fence. A barefoot girl in ragged jeans, scribbling on the sidewalk. Miss Carter frowned, sensing something unusual, her gaze lingering on the maple tree. She turned away, but the seed of suspicion was planted, ready to bloom into discovery. Jada and Alma sat oblivious, their heads bent over a spelling list. The world narrowed to their shared haven. The maple's shadow stretched long, a quiet warning of the eyes now watching. Tomorrow, a voice would thunder across the playground, and a man with silver hair would step into their secret. But for now, they were just two girls, one inside the fence, one out, bound by a promise stronger than iron. That bright afternoon, the air was sharp with autumn's edge, the sun glinting off Marshall Elementary's iron gates. Jada scratched a fraction problem in the dirt, her stick moving with the ease of a teacher. Alma giggled, her worksheet forgotten, as Jada turned numbers into a story about sharing apples. Across the playground, a black SUV pulled up, its engine humming low. A man stepped out, tall, silver-haired, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the children's chatter. Henry Marshall, the billionaire who built half of Atlanta's skyline, had come to surprise his daughter, a rare visit prompted by a teacher's note about Alma's newfound confidence. His eyes scanned the playground, then froze. There was Alma, his Alma, sitting under the maple tree, not with a classmate, but with a barefoot girl in ragged jeans, her face smudged with street dust. Henry's jaw tightened, his steps quickening across the grass. "Alma," his voice thundered, sharp enough to make both girls jump. "Step away from her. Now!" The words cut through their laughter, leaving silence in their wake. Alma stood, her small hands balled into fists. "No, Daddy. She's my friend." Her voice trembled but held firm. "Jada teaches me. She's why I'm doing better." Jada froze, her stick still in hand, her heart pounding like it had under the overpass. Henry's eyes narrowed, confusion warring with anger. He waved off the security guards approaching behind him, their radios crackling. "Who are you?" he demanded, his gaze locking on Jada. "Where do you live? Who are your parents?" Jada stood, small but steady, her dark eyes meeting his without flinching. "My mother's sick," she said, her voice quiet but clear, like a bell in the chaos. "I live outside." The words hung heavy, raw, cutting through the polished world Henry knew. He blinked, his anger faltering, replaced by a flicker of shock. This child, barely taller than his briefcase, spoke with a clarity that disarmed him. "What were you teaching her?" he asked, softer now, his voice almost curious. Jada knelt, picking up her stick. "Fractions," she said. She drew a circle in the dirt, split it into parts, and explained, her words simple, her logic sharp. "If you got 3 apples and split them 4 ways, each gets this much." She marked the dirt, her hands steady despite the weight of his stare. Alma nodded proudly. "She makes it easy, Daddy." Henry watched, his breath catching. The girl's mind was a beacon, untouched by the rags she wore or the streets she called home. He saw not a vagrant, but a teacher, a child whose brilliance outshone his empire. The playground seemed to still, the hum of buses and children fading. Henry's shoulders softened, his hand lowering from the gesture that had stopped the guards. He looked at Alma, then back at Jada, her small frame silhouetted against the maple's leaves. Something shifted in him, a crack in the wall of wealth and distance he'd built. "Alma," he said quietly, his voice no longer thunder, but a whisper of something new. "Invite your friend in." Jada's eyes widened, her fingers tightening around her stick. Alma's face lit up, a smile breaking through like sunlight. The iron gate, once a barrier between their worlds, felt less like a wall and more like a bridge. Henry's words were a spark, igniting a possibility Jada hadn't dared dream. For the first time, Jada felt seen, not as a street girl, but as someone who could change a heart as big as a city. Henry Marshall moved like a man reborn. Within days, he wielded his influence like a wand, cutting through red tape to secure a spot for Ida in Atlanta's finest rehab center. Jada watched, wide-eyed, as social workers escorted her mother from Pine and Glen Street, Aida's trembling hands clutching a new blanket. "You'll see her soon," Henry promised, his voice soft but certain. Jada nodded, clutching her tattered book, her heart caught between hope and fear. Henry didn't stop there. He arranged a full scholarship for Jada at Marshall Elementary, complete with a small apartment nearby. No more bridges, no more dumpsters. The news hit like wildfire. "Billionaire adopts homeless girl who taught his daughter," screamed the headlines. TV anchors replayed Jada's story, her barefoot lessons under the maple tree, now a legend. Social media buzzed with hashtags, #Jada's Journey, #Atlanta Hero. Strangers calling her an inspiration. But Jada, now in a clean uniform, felt the weight of eyes again, not unlike the cameras in the Crawfords' house. She stayed quiet, her mind on her mother's empty gaze. For Henry, it was more than charity. Watching Jada, he saw echoes of his late wife, Clara, whose laughter once filled rooms as she worked with children's charities. Clara had believed in second chances, in the light inside every child. He'd buried that belief under skyscrapers and deals, but Jada's stubborn spark, her lessons in the dirt, her love for a broken mother, cracked his heart open. "You're what she'd have fought for," he told Jada one evening, his voice thick, as they sat in his office overlooking the city. Jada looked up, unsure, but her small hand squeezed his, a silent thank you. At Marshall Elementary, Jada and Alma became inseparable. They studied side by side in the library, Jada explaining fractions while Alma read aloud, her voice growing bold. They ate lunch together, sharing apples and giggles, their desks pushed close. "You're like my sister," Alma whispered one day, passing Jada a crayon drawing of two girls under a maple tree. Jada's eyes stung, her fingers tracing the colorful lines. "Sisters," she echoed, the word warm, like a hearth she'd never known. Their laughter filled the halls, a bridge no fence could break. Months passed, and spring bloomed over Atlanta. A letter arrived from the rehab center. Ida Williams had completed her program. Henry drove Jada to the visitation room, her new shoes squeaking on the polished floor. Jada's heart raced as the door opened. Ida stood there transformed, her eyes clear, her hair neat, her smile shaky but real. "Baby," she whispered, tears spilling as she knelt. Jada ran to her, burying her face in her mother's arms, the scent of soap replacing the street's grime. "You kept your promise, baby," Ida said, her voice breaking. "You found us a home." Jada sobbed, her small body shaking, the wound of their separation healing in that embrace. For the first time, she felt her mother's love whole, not fractured by ghosts. Henry stood back, his silver hair catching the light, his eyes glistening. He'd built towers that touched the sky, but this, a mother and daughter reunited, a child's courage rewarded, was purer than any deal he'd closed. Jada turned to him, her smile brighter than the city lights beyond the window. "Thank you," she whispered, and Henry nodded, his throat tight. Money had bought the rehab, the scholarship, the apartment, but this moment, this family reborn, was priceless. That evening, Jada stood in the apartment's small garden, Alma beside her, their hands linked. Ida sat nearby, sipping tea, her laughter soft but steady. The city skyline glittered, no longer cruel but hopeful. Jada's book lay open on the grass, its pages worn but cherished. She'd kept her promise, not just to her mother, but to herself, to never let the streets dim her light. And in that light, two worlds had become one. The Marshall's garden, a sprawling oasis behind Henry's mansion, bloomed with roses and possibility. Jada stood at its edge, her new shoes soft against the earth, her eyes tracing Atlanta's city lights. They twinkled like stars she'd once wished upon under bridges, each one a memory of cold nights and whispered prayers. Alma ran beside her, her laughter a melody, her curls bouncing as she chased a firefly. "Jada, catch it!" she squealed, her voice bright, no longer lonely. Jada grinned, joining the chase, their hands brushing as they darted through the grass. Sisters, not by blood but by heart, from worlds once divided by iron fences. Henry stepped into the garden, his silver hair catching the moonlight. The man who'd built skyscrapers now stood humbled, his eyes soft as he watched the girls. "You've changed her," he said to Jada, his voice low, heavy with gratitude. "You've changed me." Jada looked up, her small hand still holding Alma's. She saw not the billionaire, but a father who'd learned to listen to see. "You changed us too," she said, her voice quiet but steady, like the girl who'd taught fractions in the dirt. Jada's mind wandered, a quiet tide pulling her back. She remembered the streets, Pine and Glen's broken glass, the sting of insults. Crackhead's kid spat like poison. She saw Aida's trembling hands, her mother's eyes lost to ghosts. She felt the weight of hunger, the ache of being invisible, her prayers whispered to an empty sky. Each memory was a scar, but they no longer bled. They were proof of her survival, her fight, her light that refused to fade. Now, standing in this garden, with Aida's laughter in the air and Alma's hand in hers, Jada whispered, "Maybe God didn't forget us. Maybe he was waiting for someone to see." Ida joined them, her steps steady, her smile no longer fragile. She wrapped an arm around Jada, her warmth a promise kept. Henry stood back, his gaze on the skyline he'd shaped, but his heart on the family before him. Jada's courage had rebuilt more than a home. It had rebuilt him. The city lights glowed, a canvas of second chances, and Jada felt it. She was seen, not just by Henry or Alma or Ida, but by a world that had once turned away. No child is born broken. Some are just waiting for someone to notice the light still burning inside them. Jada's story reminds us that compassion is stronger than privilege, and that even in a divided world, kindness can build the only bridge that truly matters. Her small hands, once tracing letters in dirt, had rewritten destinies. Her voice, once a whisper under bridges, had silenced a city with awe. And her heart, scarred but unbroken, had taught a billionaire what wealth could never buy. In the garden, under the stars, Jada stood tall. A girl who was seen, a girl who had won.